So away we go then, Iran all in white, three-time winners of the Asian Cup. Half a chance, see for Oman, it must be a penalty. That is going to be a penalty inside a minute.
Straight ball over the top, misjudged, just flighted straight ball over the top. Al Husseini got a little bit lazy.
داره بهش میگه سردار راست خود علی بیرانوند زبر خواهد ده حرکت مبارک رو میگیره بیرانوند بارکلا علی بیرو دمت گرم ناز نفست بارکلا سردارم بهش گفت آقا راستت میزنه.
Defender just has to be careful, and he wasn't careful, and he's been punished. It's a really soft goal from Oman's point of view.
پاس داریم می‌کنیم یه ارسال خوب دروازه فرصت داریم تارمی یک کنترل از مهدی تارمی داخل محوطه جریمه گرفتن پنالتی رو گرفته داور پنالتی واسه ایرانه میتونیم دو گله بکنیم خودمونو توی همین نیمه اول.
Jagger 2-0. Call as you like from the Iranian captain. It's
really good defending, but that's a cool penalty. Sits the goalkeeper down, a little bit of lift straight down the middle.
راحت باید از سمت عمان عبور بکنه به مرحله بعد خودمون رو برسونیم. ایران 2 عمان 3. دژاگر اشتباه کرده اینجا اشکان مهم نیست میتونه تو رو پس بگیرید در این میدون. محسن قسانی زمش از راه دور میزنه محکماً میزنه با بیرانوند واکنش نشون میده.
The team has come all the way through. What a chance for Azmoun. There he is again, and that's a terrific ball. This could settle it. What a good save.
Just pops into a little pocket. Nobody wants to go and engage him and drifts a ball over the top. Great strike. Better save.
پرتاب بلند و تند و تیز داخل محوطه جریمه پشت همه سردار آزمون و ضربه‌ای که میزنه و تو چارچوب نبود توپه. قسانی توپ ازش گرفتن واسه تیم ما واسه خوب برای مهدی طارمی سرعتش هم بالا سردار اضافه میشه پاس برای سردار آزمون 2 در مقابل 2 هست خود سردار پاس عالی گل سوم بازم دروازه‌بان نذاشت طارمی گل بزنه حالا سردار آزمون.
Well, Azmoun's on the charge again here. Taremi's in the middle. Taremi, excellent goalkeeping. Azmoun again, that sums up his night. Stoppage time, and that's all we're going to play. So Iran will go through the quarterfinals.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Gold Exam, our 105th, episode, which is unreal. Doing this in the past now, let's say, starting 2014, now it's 2019, these past 5 years is absolutely incredible. I'm Pasha Hajjan, I'll be your host today. It's been a long time since I've been on the pod. I'm joined by Paul Goldreeves and Sinai Tamian, two regular panelists and directors of the episode, and it's an absolute honor for us to also have another special guest, Zina Sadrazadeh, at Iran Futi, if I'm not mistaken. Sina, how are you doing and where are you calling from?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm from Bristol in the UK.
Okay, awesome. So you're in the same local area such as Sina is. So guys, I appreciate you guys all taking the time. So today we want to obviously talk about our win against Oman. The last time we passed the knockout stages was back in 2004, which is a quite long time, especially always knowing that Iran has always been a giant in Asian football. So Babak, talking about you, obviously we want to do a little bit of analysis of Oman match. What did you think about Kirish's initial lineup before anything else?
Yeah, I thought the lineup was decent. Mohammadi coming in, partly probably because Ehsan Hajsafi is on a booking, and just to keep him available for probably a more difficult tie in the next round. Other than that, overall, I was a little bit surprised with Jahanbakh starting, although if you're going to give him another start, then this would be the game, rather than throwing him in from the start in a later stage when he still needs more minutes under his belt. So I thought they were both calculated changes in that respect from Carlos. I would say that in defense, Majid Hosseini coming in was probably a 50-50 from my side, and then I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later. His selection going on into this tournament might be in question too.
Sina, initially before the match started, I had predicted that possibly Taremi won't be starting, despite the fact that we all could have obviously predicted that he was going to start. But I just realized that because he was on a yellow card, especially we would be playing, the winner of China, and I believe it was Thailand, was China. For the folks that are listening, they advanced, so that's Iran who's going to play in the next round. Is that with a high distance and because of set pieces, that Carlos Queiroz possibly was not going to start him. Were you satisfied with Taremi's performance today, especially that he didn't have the striking boots on?
Well, I think, for me personally, I don't think there was any question whether Taremi was going to start or not. I think before we start thinking about the China game, it was always important to get the win against Oman in the first place, to put ourselves, of course, today in the quarter-final. And I don't have a lot to complain about in regards to his starting position. But his performance, I mean, when you talk about Taremi and in particular people who watch the Iranian local league, they know that he finished as top goal scorer 2 seasons in a row, but I would say finishing is not his strongest point. And of course, we've seen that in the past few years, but in particular in this game. But the good thing about Taremi is he has really good movement when we are in possession. He finds himself in good spaces, and he's always there when the ball is dropped in the box. And not every striker can say that they can do that. I think it's one of those talents that he has. He doesn't have the composure, as we've seen. His finishing isn't up to the standard that it should be, but nonetheless, he's always been dangerous. And also, when you think about Taremi and the role that he has, I think off the ball he provides a lot of cover, a lot of yards, pressing defenders, pressing midfielders, and that's something we've talked about for so long since he's come into the team. That he defensively he's been great. He helps out his fullbacks and his midfielders, and I know that he didn't score the goals that he should have today, but I don't think there's any question whether he will be starting in the next game or even further.
Iran Futi, you could comment on anything the guy said, but the question that I have for you is that as we've seen throughout this Asian Cup, the partnership of the center back pairing between Mortaza and Majid Hosseini has been changed. That's Kanani. And surprisingly, Majid Hosseini has been one of, I would say, our informed players playing overseas. And what's interesting to me is that for me at least, I would say that he's had not the best of tournaments. He's actually been a liability at the back. What did you make out of his performance today? And especially that penalty that he committed that could have potentially could have changed the dynamic of this whole entire match. And possibly could have not even advanced thanks to Bayram and Saif. What do you think about this pairing between Mortaza and Majid Hosseini specifically?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Hosseini, obviously, he's a young player. He's one for the future for sure, but he's been a big liability this tournament. And ever since the lunging tackle he did on the Yemeni player in the first game, should have definitely been a red card, that one. And then today in the first minute, gave away a very soft penalty. I think he could have read the situation a lot better. And, that could have definitely changed the dynamic of the whole game. But, he's definitely one for the future. I think Carlos realizes that, by starting him so much. But also looking at the alternatives, there aren't really that many alternatives he could put there. He's probably the best one, I would say. Rouzbeh Cheshmi, I'm not totally convinced by him. I think the partnership right now, is probably the best that we have.
Babak, coming back to you, what do you think about Majid Hosseini's performance today? And our dear friend of also the show, Arya Alaver, do you believe that it was more issue at fault was more to the Purali Genji than Majid Hosseini, that which led to that foul? But what are your thoughts about Majid Hosseini?
I looked at that comment and I would say, maybe Mortaza misjudged the ball, but then Majid Hosseini wasn't on his toes, and once the forward gets behind you, you don't make such a tackle. You don't even get into that position to risk the player clipping his heels against yours and giving away penalties. So, like Iran Futi said, I think he's been a liability from the beginning of the tournament since that tackle, which was very, very dangerous. And today, again, he was very nervous. The penalty, of course, we were saved, but that was a yellow. In another era, it could have been a red. And then later in the game, he made another mistake, which gave away a foul towards our left side. But then he didn't get a card for that. It could have easily been a second yellow and a red card. So if I was Queiroz right now, I would be thinking very hard about whether I would start with Hosseini in the quarterfinals or not. But the problem here is the alternatives are not really banging on the door. Rouzbeh Cheshmi has been used mostly in midfield throughout this tournament. And then you have Kanani. Okay, he was not so bad in the game against Vietnam, but it would be quite a gutsy decision from Queiroz to drop Hosseini, especially knowing that Mortaza Purali Genji hasn't been too much better. He's probably not made any of those critical mistakes, but even he has been a bit, I would say, subpar. Overall, I would say one thing is that these defenders have been used to a far more, let's say, protected line in midfield when they play together for Iran, but our tactics and our approach has been a little bit more expansive during this tournament, and this has left them quite exposed, especially to the long ball that's coming across diagonally or from the center backs of the opponents.
Sinan, I know you spoke about Omid Ebrahimi on Twitter. I'm going to let you obviously elaborate on why you thought he was our worst, performer of a player in the first half. But what do you think about Majid Hosseini, especially keeping the fact that he's always been calm and composed even for his club now? A lot of Turkish fans of his, respected club that he's playing for are huge fans of him. I mean, I was a huge fan of him when, Carlos Queiroz made the big decision of dropping Jalal Hosseini for him, and his introduction has been, in this past couple of games, I would say, has been abysmal, to be honest, especially knowing that, he's still a young center back. He has a lot of room for improvement. But could you allude to, the Omid Ebrahimi situation and how that led you think that potentially led to Majid Hosseini's downfall in this match?
I think, firstly, discussing the penalty, I think forgetting how the ball ended up there in the first place. So if we put that aside, I think the challenge itself was really foolish and I think inexperienced, to say the least. I told you earlier, Pasha, it really reminded me of the FA Cup final and the Phil Jones tackle on Hazard in the penalty, a needless foul, which gave away the penalty to Chelsea, and then Chelsea ended up winning the game. This really reminded me of that as well. But I think as a whole, the point that I was making about Ebrahimi, and again, I think having had time to think about the game as a whole in the first half, and comparing it to the second half as well, I think in the first half we were pushing a lot of men forward to press early, to win the ball early, and the fullbacks were really high and wide. Taremi was almost playing as a second striker next to Osman, and also this meant that Ebrahimi had to push further forward, which meant that as soon as the long ball came, it was constantly Purali Ganji and Hosseini with their striker, which, going back to what Bobak said, and I completely agree with him, these are not the tactics that this team is used to, which I think is a bit of a credit maybe to Queiroz in terms of he was willing to gamble and he was willing to risk by pushing men forward and risking that, and it almost, of course, it cost us with the penalty. But I think in the second half we were a lot more deeper. The midfield was a lot more disciplined, and I think Ebrahim in the second half, his performance improved as well because he no longer had to press out of position and find himself in what I'd call no man's land. I think he held his position well. He kept sweeping up balls that were coming from deep in front of the defence, and I think that was something we didn't have in the first half. So I would say altogether that Queiroz and his tactics kind of exposed the defence and made Ebrahim, in my opinion, look a bit bad as well, because it's Ebrahim's job to give that protection to defence. But again, when you look at the bigger picture and how we were playing in the first half, I think that made Ebrahim look bad and the defence as well. And again, second half, I thought the defence improved massively. I know, again, Hosseini made the mistake that Bobak alluded to earlier, the foul on the left-hand side. But putting that aside, I think Purali and Hosseini had a much better performance in the second half. Again, because they were playing in tactics and situations that they've been used to for so long in Team Melli on the Queiroz.
Mm-hmm. Sina from Iran Footy, and just adding on to what Sina Saimi just mentioned, do you think that it potentially, with the crucial role that Omid Ebrahimi played for us in the World Cup and how big of a player he was in that tournament, do you potentially think that's fatigue? Because we got to also keep in mind he's 31 years old. Saïd Zatoleh, as we've just seen, he's been such a marvelous player for us, such a creative midfielder, and his loss is huge. And I believe it also has put in more pressure upon Omid Ebrahimi. And especially now knowing that we'll discuss later about Vaida missing the next match. What do you think about Omid Ebrahimi? Do you think potentially that Queiroz has to make a decision of potentially subbing him? Because he's giving protection, to our backboard, but in this match, even that's, I agree with him that, he wasn't the best of quality, and now we've got China next, and the guys will allude to it, that very pacey side, sort of such as Vietnam. But what do you think about Obida and Brahimi, and what do you think about potentially his performances down the road in this tournament?
Yeah, I definitely agree that he didn't have his best of games or the best of tournaments after the World Cup. But of course, the World Cup, he had Ezos Folai on his side, which, you know, hugely influential player. He is reaching the latter stages of his career at the age of 31, as you said. He doesn't play in the most fast-paced league in Qatar. Am I right? Yeah. So, you know, he's not used to this, but and as well, it's a long tournament where there's not that much time to rest in between big matches. So I think he will get you know, exposed later down the stages, and it is definitely down to Carlos Queiroz to decide when it's time for him to be taken out, and maybe that's why Rouzbek Cheshmi has been deployed so much, just to help him out in the midfield defensively. You know, he's a centre back by trade, but being deployed in centre midfield just to help him out. So yeah, I definitely agree with you guys that, you know, he's reaching the latter stage of his career. Fatigue is probably hitting in. Definitely he can read the game as well as he used to. No one questions that, but it's definitely the fitness at this stage of his career.
Bob,
also, I think just to go back to the question that was asked earlier as well, in terms of whether Hosseini should be dropped on. I still think Hosseini and Purali Ganji are our best two centre backs. I don't, as Bobak said as well, the replacements aren't as good as these two players, and I will be very, very surprised if Hosseini or Purali Ganji are dropped from Thursday onwards.
Baba, before if you could also talk about, you know, what you thought about the entire match as a whole and what positive or negative you could take out of this Oman match, is that, let's talk about Ayers Bayram. We've all been critical of him even before the World Cup, as rightly so, because of his performance, but we must say now he's been phenomenal. And, you know, that penalty that he saved could have, as mentioned before, could have changed the dynamic of the game, would have been much more pressure for us. And we're not a team that when we're behind, that, you know, we tend to always come back and win a match, you know, but thankfully we've always been in the lead, and it's very hard for the opposition to score against us. What do you think about Ayers Bayram's, you know, performance, and, you know, of what and how crucial he has been for them? Would you say he definitely is Asia's best goalkeeper at the moment?
I would argue that he probably is. He is giving confidence to the rest of the players. You feel almost an air of irresistible force who is not going to be beaten. So that penalty was another testament to his newfound stature, let's say, where before the World Cup there was a bit 50-50 whether we wanted him to start, but then he's the undisputed number one for sure right now. So he gives confidence to everyone else. You feel like even if you make a mistake, he's going to be there to stop it. So in that sense, I would say there's no question about his role going forward. You asked about the overall performance, and in terms of pluses and minuses, I would say one of the main pluses is our pressing is relentless. We do it from the start till the end, and especially against weaker opponents. And I would classify Oman, with all due respect, in that category, like most of the opponents we've had till now. We put them under pressure when they have the ball, and more often than not, they give it away because of that. So that has been a major plus. So the fitness has been great. On the other hand, you would say that our build-up play, good in the middle third, but then when we reach the final third, sometimes we try to get cute and we end up being sloppy, especially when it comes to the front two or front three with Taremi, Azmoun, and maybe Jahanbakhsh. So that is something we definitely have to improve. And another negative is, how does the defense deal with the fact that we are taking the games to our opponents? They are far too exposed, and they're probably not used to it. I would argue that going forward, we may sit deeper much more than we have throughout the tournament, whether it's against China because of Amiri's suspension, maybe Cheshmi comes in alongside Ibrahimi, or then afterwards against the Saudis or Japan, and then you have maybe the Koreans in the final, or Australia. So the games are going to get tougher, and I feel with everything we've seen and the second half today against Oman, we are maybe a little bit inclined towards going back to our nature. And that wouldn't be the worst thing for us. And hopefully we improve our finishing, especially Sardar Azmoun, who's been a little bit off when it comes to finding a target.
Hi, this is Kat, and you're listening to Golbazan, and I hope you continue listening to their amazing podcast. Thank you all for the support. Love you, Golbazan.
Sina, what are your thoughts about Bobak and anything that you would like to add?
Well, I mean, I think in the second half of this game, we had more chances. We had much better chances, and it goes back to what Bobak said in terms of the game and the tactics being something that has benefited us in the last few years, and that is to be able to counter. And I think the build-up play was good at times in the first half, but our best chances came in the second half when Oman needed to push on for a goal, committed more men forward, and I think towards the last 30-35 minutes they were playing with 4-4-2, which meant, an extra man in midfield for us, which then on the counter we were able to create those chances. And going further, I agree with him. I think we will be more of a counter-attacking team, just like we have seen in the past few years, and something that is our biggest strength. And I think there's no one better than us in Asia when it comes to counter-attacking football. But I think the China game is important because China is literally on the verge, is somewhere on the borderline of an underdog, but they're still very dangerous. They're not as good as the Japans and South Koreas and Australias, but they're not as, let's say, with all due respect, as maybe weak or toothless as Oman or even Vietnam. So I think the next game is really important for us. But I can see us going back to the tactics of defending deep, not committing many men forward like we did in the first half, and relying on counter-attacks and a mistake from opponent to get the goal.
Sina, from Iran, if you could add also what Babak Goldiz and Sina said from what your overall thoughts on the game was, but also now going to the next discussion before we move on to our preview of Iran versus China, is that what do you think about Sardar Azmoun and Mahdi Taremi today, especially knowing that they weren't, on the best of days for scoring, that plenty of chances to score and potentially could have won with a huge margin? And if you could, elaborate on that for us, please.
Well, I think they've both had a pretty decent tournament so far. Today, they weren't at their best for sure. I don't think anyone would argue with me there. Azmoun definitely missed a lot of chances that he should have probably put away. And, you could tell with the level of frustration when he was coming off as well as when he was on the field as well. He was angry with himself, angry at his fullbacks for not crossing in sooner. Just angry at just the whole game basically, even though we were ahead. You could tell he's his biggest critic there. Yeah, he should definitely come back stronger, but I don't think you can put all the blame on him. I think the crossing today wasn't as great as it would have been in usual games. Jahanbakhsh, he's come back from injury, a pretty long injury. His crossing wasn't great today. He was, a player that's known for his delivery, that's known for his pinpoint accuracy when it comes to passing, but he couldn't beat the first man a lot of times. It's the same with the fullbacks when they came up as well. The service wasn't great, and he was very frustrated. Sardar Azmoun was very frustrated at them for their level of service. As for the tactics against China, I definitely agree with Sina that the tactics that we see today and the tactics that we see against China will probably be very different. Carlos Queiroz will probably treat China with a lot more respect, I think, than he treated Oman, where we will sit back and we will counter-attack, because that's where we're good in Asia, of course, is our counter-attacking play.
Babak, the next question I have for you, we have a specific question in regards to Sardar Azmoun from Adyek Bash Haydari. We appreciate you guys always sending your questions in. His question was this just an off game for our strikers with respect to finishing, and is a stellar performance in this tournament essential for Azmoun in particular to move on to a top-tier club?
Tough question on the second part, but overall I would think that, okay, maybe we are lucky we didn't need their goals today. Taremi especially, I thought he had one or two good opportunities, and he had a good shot which the goalkeeper saved in the second half. It was he hit it very well, but the keeper made a fantastic save. Osman, on the other hand, you feel he's taking one extra touch. Maybe it's a little bit of a lack of confidence, or he's trying to get into an ideal scoring position. But if he were to take some shots a little bit earlier, there was a couple of times in the second half again, then I would think that maybe with his good accuracy, we could have seen another goal or two. So I'm not so worried today, and I think with more space to get in behind against the likes of China, or if we do advance in the next rounds, I'm relatively confident that both Osman and Taremi will be able to get on the score sheet again. In terms of Osman playing better, I think he's had an overall decent tournament. Today probably being one of his weaker performances, but overall his link-up play, especially with Taremi, is very dangerous. They have a good chemistry. You can see that. That's why I think Taremi is undroppable from my perspective, unlike what you said at the beginning, Pasha. I think the play will be for the other wing, where Jahanbakhsh may be prone to be dropped. With Osman scoring more will give him a chance to move to another club. I'm not sure he wants to. I think he's at the age of 24 now, and he's probably 2 years too late in terms of moving in the ideal scenario. And I'm not confident that he has the ambitions or the, let's say, the mentality to want to go to one of Europe's top leagues. And right now, to be fair, over the last 18 months or so, would any of the big sides in those leagues that he was linked to earlier actually want to take a gamble on him? I'm not so sure.
If you could just also elaborate on what Babak said in terms of Sardar Ozmoon, and if there's anything you would like to add, if he potentially could move to a top tier coach, he was linked to Tractor Stuzzy just recently.
Yeah, I mean, Osman is a little of a word player. I mean, on his day, he is possibly the best striker in Asia, but then he has days like today where he lacks composure. I think at times he doesn't have a clear sense of what's going on around him and whether he has time to take a touch or he needs to finish first time, which I think lets him down. But in terms of his work rate and what he gives to the team, I don't think there's any question of how useful he can be. But again, I think further in the competition, when we go up, and if we do go up against the big boys, he would not get as many chances as he did today, and he needs to be more prolific. But again, I think that he had a good performance altogether. He was running his socks off throughout the game. He had a real hunger to press the defenders and win the ball back. And there were at times where any other player you would think, why, those players would not necessarily chase down those balls in the channels, but he was doing that the entire game. And I think his fitness has improved as well. This is a player who we've said many times that he can't finish 90 minutes, he can't last the entire game, but he has done in this tournament, and I think that's credit to him. But again, I think him and Taremi, they need to be better at finishing. And in your answer to whether he can go to the top leagues require consistency, and he needs to be more consistent.
Thank you, Sina, for your thoughts. Let's move on, guys, to talk about our preview of Iran versus China. Definitely, it's fantastic to see that Carlos Queiroz will be going up against Marcel Lippi, as we all know, a world-class manager that led Italy to win the 2006 FIFA World Cup. Sina from Iran Futi, my first question to you is, obviously we played against this side, in the qualifications leading up to World Cup 2018. I believe the first match was against China that we played in China. It was 0-0 draw. Very cagey match. I'm telling you, I remember it was one of our worst days. Not a great performance. And in Tehran, I believe, if I'm mistaken, correct me guys, I believe we won 2-0. And what are you expecting from this match, especially knowing that China has been such a better side since that moment in time till now? And if you could just give us your thoughts on that.
Just looking back at the tournament as a whole, throughout the group stages and throughout the previous game against Oman, is that we do have a tendency of taking an extra touch in midfield and in the attack, as we've seen. And, it's fine to do that against, with respect, teams like Oman and teams like Yemen. But I think we would get found out against a quicker side like China, where they do focus more on closing down early on in the game, and that's definitely where I think is our most vulnerable, is early on in the game. We tend to, when we score, we gain confidence, and we play like the traditional Iranian side that we're all used to seeing. So I think definitely we need to keep calm within the first 20 minutes or so, not give away anything stupid like we did today. Release the ball early, take 1-2 touches in midfield. Don't let the Chinese players, come up behind us. Be very well organised. Basically, just don't give away anything stupid within the first 20 minutes. And I think, we could definitely take out a result from China.
Babak, you could also add on what do you think about our performance that, with the tactical switch that Carlos Queiroz will do. But I have a specific question for you that it's from our Twitter friend at MMS_London. We appreciate you sending your question in. He asked, with Amiri suspended, how do you think Queiroz will try to solve this issue? Will it simply be a case of selecting a like-for-like replacement, or do you think he will make other tactical tweaks, especially as teammates' performance against Oman was so disjointed? Also, I would also like to add to that, Babak, is also you got to keep in mind that we all would agree that Ehsan Hajsafi will bring a much more balance coming into the midfield, but also keeping in fact that he could potentially get another yellow card, which he'll potentially miss the semis if we do advance. And what do you think? Do you think maybe we'll see Noor Olahi, Masoud Chojay coming to the sign, which I don't think Sami is going to say something about that, but I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about this.
That's a very, very long question, Pasha. I'll start with the last part where you said Hajsafi getting a yellow card. No one cares. Right now, we can't think that far ahead, imagining that Hajsafi might get suspended. If he gets suspended, but we go through, so be it. So I wouldn't think that will be a factor whatsoever. It may have been a small factor today because you don't lose too much if you play Milad Mohammadi. In terms of like for like, if I was a betting man, and I wouldn't bet against Carlos Queiroz because it's very rare that we've read his mind over the last 7-8 years. But at this moment, I have a feeling we may see Cheshmi and Ebrahimi play in midfield. So Cheshmi coming on for Amiri to give us a little bit more of a solid, let's say, protection or cover for the defense, especially considering, like Iran Footy said, China is much pacier. We'll probably respect them a little bit more in that sense and maybe go back into our more natural tendency of being a little bit more of a counter-attacking side. In terms of tactics, again, I think that's like what I just said. We would be a little bit more conservative. Maybe that will play in the hands of players like Azmoun and Taremi, who would have a little bit more space to go through when it comes to the Chinese players. I would be worried a little bit because they've got a lot of pace, and I think in the second half against Vietnam, they were really, really, really good. Against Thailand, sorry. They were really good. And okay, the Thailand side is not the strongest side in the tournament and probably not the biggest side in the tournament, but the way the Chinese dug in to come back from a goal down when it looked like that the Thais may just about pip them to that quarterfinal spot was impressive. I think you can't write off players like Lei Wu Lei and Yu Dabao, Lingao, all of them up front. They are quite a threat. So it will be interesting, and I worry about tight games that go into extra time. And even against Oman, there was a brief moment in the first half where I felt that this game has extra time and maybe penalties written all over it.
Tina, if you could add on to what Babak said, and how do you think that will, counter with China? Do you think we'll be playing more up front, or do you think we're going to be more on the defensive side?
I think that Babak is absolutely right in terms of the pace and the danger that China posed in the final third, but you also got to remember that in the second half they were desperate because they were 1-0 down and they were playing against Thailand, which I don't think they will play in the same manner they did in that game. They wouldn't play in the same way they would against Iran. I think they'll be a lot more defensive. There'll be a lot more caution in the way they approach the game. And I think it'll be a really cagey game for both teams. Iran, again, it's in the quarterfinals. You also got to remember that tight margins are at this stage, and anyone making a mistake could be costly. So, and considering the two managers, of course, we know Carlos Queiroz, also Marcello Lippi on the other side, one of the greatest Italian managers of all time. I'm not sure they'll be too keen to be the ones who make the mistakes. So I expect both teams to be on the defensive side. Again, going back to the games we played against China in the World Cup qualifiers and against some of the other teams who play in a similar way with a back three, I've seen us struggle against that formation, mostly because we are outnumbered in the final third and we struggle to create chances. So I wonder whether that will be something else to worry about in this game. I have a feeling it will go to extra time. There might be one goal in it.
Would you consider, Sina, when you say 3 against 3, would you consider having a proper number 10, maybe Saman Ghoddos coming on instead of Amiri?
Possibly, but then you've also got to think about a couple of other things, because then, for example, as we said, and I don't know if you guys agree, again, with Queiroz, it's a defensive side that matters. So he will still want his central midfield to be tight, to be disciplined and make sure that they don't make any mistakes. Also, when we consider the role that Amiri's had, especially in the group stages and in the first half of this game as well, when Taremi goes in to play alongside Osman when we have the ball, so we play with 2 strikers, Amiri tends to be the guy who pushes out wide and acts as a left midfielder, which then, if you consider that, then Haj Safi will be a much better option in that role. I'm not saying that's that's the way he will play in that game, but I still think Haj Safi will be the better option for the Amiri role. Ghoddos, again, I mean, we've discussed this prior to the World Cup as well, Babak, if you remember. Does he trust Ghoddos with the defensive instructions that Queiroz gives to his central midfielders? I'm not too sure. I think it might be something that he considers later in the game, but for me, there's no question he will approach it to make sure they keep a clean sheet first and foremost before being able to score a goal.
Sina, from your own footage, if you could add on what the guy said, and also would like to, talk to you about what do you think the pairing of center back is going to be? Do you think that, Carlos is still going to go with Majid Amorso, or do you think Canon, potentially even maybe Cheshmi will become our center back for that game?
Just to add on Sina's point. Sina, sorry, what did you say? The last bit you just said?
It was about Haj Safi pulling out wide Amiri pulling out wide in these few games and Taremi being like a second striker and Haj Safi being more comfortable for that role. Yeah. And also the fact that it'll be a cagey game.
I was going to talk about the defensive sides, because Amiri is obviously going to miss the game. I don't think Carlos Queiroz trusts him defensively at all, because from what I've seen and what we've all seen is that I think Ghoddos does get a bit overexcited sometimes, especially defensively. He does have a bit of a temper, as we see when he went in for that. It should have been a red card when he stamped on the player's leg. I think he does have a bit of an anger, aggression issue, and for a defensive player, you do need to be very disciplined in the midfield, and you can't give away stuff like that. Otherwise, you'll be treading on eggshells from very early on in the game. As for the centre-back partnership, as we've talked about before, I don't really think there's another alternative as to what we've got. Kurali Ganji is our best centre-back that we have, for sure, so that he's definitely sticking around. Hasn't played at his best, but definitely going to stick around. As with Hosseini, yeah, he's been a bit of a liability. We can all say that, but I really don't see him switching out any other player in for Hosseini. So I guess either put another man in midfield to cover him, or just, I guess just pray, because I don't see any other alternative for Hosseini in the defence.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have another question. Sorry, Pasha. Yeah. In the China game, I think we all expressed about surprise to see Jahanbakhsh start, but I thought he had one of his better games for Iran today, and of course he got the important first goal too. What do we think about his role in the coming game? Will he be a starter, or will we see Torabi or even Ghoddos starting on the right?
After a game like that, when it was one of his better games, like Sina said, and he's got a couple of let's say 60, 70 odd minute games under his belt, it's difficult to see him being dropped. He's a Carlos Queiroz favorite, generally speaking. So whilst I think Saman Ghoddos has had a good tournament already, he's been calm on the ball. He's been quite creative as well. And when he came on today, he linked well with Reza Yan, working the overlap a couple of times. But tough to see Jahanbakhsh being dropped for this game. So I would think that he starts, and then we'd see Ghoddos coming on probably. That's what I would think.
Sina from Iran, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's what will happen. I wouldn't say Jahanbakhsh is still at his best. I think there's still a bit to go. His crossing wasn't great, as I said before. He did hit the first man a lot of the time, but you can tell he's definitely hungry to create for his team. He's got the strength. He wants to close down players. His work ethic is as brilliant as always, and that goal will do nothing but give him as much confidence going into the next game.
I think that one of the big differences from Jahanbakhsh on this tournament, even against Iraq, where I watched a bit of the highlights, was that he's finding himself far more centrally, as opposed to being so constrained to the byline when we played in the World Cup or in a lot of games during the preparations. I find him cutting in pretty well. This could be because Osman is vacating that space as he goes into the channel maybe. But even the goal, he cut into the center of the field. Sometimes we haven't seen too much of this in the past. So if he keeps on doing that and he becomes a goal threat, even if he's not creating as much as he could, that would add a lot to our attack. And he's proven that with AZ Alkmaar in the past, but he's never had that for us. So I would watch this, let's say, not role switch, but this, let's say, addition to his game when it comes to Team Melli going forward.
Guys, few last questions before we wrap this episode up, and I'm going to give you guys my lineup, which we always we know we can't predict Carlos Queiroz. It's literally impossible. But I have obviously in goal Ariza Beiranvand, right back I have Ramin Rezaian. I've picked Morteza Prat, Ganji, and Kanani, and I just believe that Majid Hosseini is going to be dropped for the next match. Left back Milad Mohammadi. In the midfield, I've selected Omid Ebrahimi, Ehsan Haisafi, and Ashkan Dejager. And for up top, Ariza Jahanbakhsh, Taremi, and Osman. I mean, I think we would pretty much all agree on it, but besides the Kanani thing. But Sina, what do you think about the preferred lineup? And do you potentially see that maybe we'll see Jahanbakhsh starting off the bench and him putting Torabi there due to, I believe he has a much of a higher work rate than Jahanbakhsh in terms of defensive.
I think that is a possibility. But I agree with both of the guys and what they said earlier on in terms of Jahanbakhsh starting. I think you would rather have Torabi off the bench with his pace and how direct he is, rather than him starting. And I would say slightly surprised when I saw Ghoddos coming on the right. I thought he might come on for Taremi and Torabi would come on for Jahanbakhsh. But nonetheless, I think he has plenty of options down the right. And also, one of the things that's, again, I mean, in this game, I had a feeling Rezaian might not start because Ghafouri started the last two games. And the fact that they've started as many games as each other might show that he thinks they are at the same level currently. Because Ghafouri started, you would say, the two difficult games in the group stage against Vietnam and Iraq. So I wonder if he might rotate the right back and play Ghafouri in the next game against China, but we'll have to wait and see.
See, now from Iran Footy, with the lineup that I've selected and, with the form that China is in right now, considering Wu Li, we've been following Asian football. I mean, he's one of the best players right now in the Chinese league and plays for Shanghai SITG, if I'm not mistaken. I believe he's their all-time goal scorer. And with the, lineup I've selected defensively, do you see any flaws with, this team going against China?
The only thing I would say is the centre-back partnership. I think everywhere else, as long as we're organised, as Carlos Queiroz normally does, drill in organisation into the team, I think we'd be fine. We've kept clean sheets all tournament. I know today we got maybe a little bit lucky to get it to come away with a clean sheet, but It's just the sense about partnership where I think our weakness lies. Everywhere else in the team, in the midfield, I think we're very organised, especially when big shout out to Ashkan Dezarga coming into the team after, his knee surgery. I thought after the World Cup, I thought that was his career finish, but he's come back and he's proven that he's still a big player for Team Melli. So, I think, we need to be more creative up top. Azmoun definitely needs to bring his shooting boots next time, because we are creating chances in the final third. There's no question about that. We just need to be more prolific, because today we won because there was a penalty that shouldn't be given. It wasn't a penalty, and a mistake from their back four. There was nothing clear cut about that. We need to put our chances away.
Well, thinking about the lineup that I've selected, and obviously with the depth that we have, which is something we haven't seen, throughout the years of Team Melli, a fantastic depth that we have in key departments right now, not so much in midfield, is that if, let's say, hypothetically, we were to go down 1-0 in these early stages, where do you see, potentially Karish could be changing the team and whatnot? And would you still keep this lineup?
I would say that, first of all, about the lineup, I think Ehsan starts, but I think he'll start at left back personally. I think, like I said earlier, I feel Cheshmi Ebrahimi might be more of the starting position with Ashkan. It's a good point from Iran Footy. Ashkan was again very good, very solid, high quality on the ball. I think the only player that's on his level or maybe better is Salman Ghoddos when it comes to the real quality and technique. But Ashkan's proving a lot of people, even like myself, wrong when it comes to playing in central midfield. It's a deeper role with more defensive responsibility, and he's been relatively good. Yes, granted, he hasn't maybe played against top class opposition, but we have to watch that going forward. In terms of the centre-back partnership, I feel just about Majid Hosseini may keep his spot. It would be a big call to drop him, but Carlos has made these calls before. And Pasha, you asked about, could you repeat your question?
If we were to go down 1-0 in the early stages, right? Do you potentially still think that if this, like Ghoddos coming in, or do you think that he's already going to start, from off the bat, going to this game?
I think, difficult, but if I was to guess right now, I would say he starts on the bench. But if we do go behind, which is something we have not seen too often in the last, 4 years maybe at least, tough to see how we react to it. But on the plus side, we have a strong bench, so you would probably even not be able to bring on all the players who you would think could have an impact. So you have Torabi, who would give you a direct threat down the wings. You have Salman Ghoddos, who gives you a goal threat, creativity, flair, and then you have Karim Ansarifard, who could give you maybe goal threat as well if he plays up front with Sardar and Taremi. So that's just off the bat, that's 3 players right there. And then, of course, you have Masoud Shajai and other players as well. So I think in terms of personnel, we have enough players to add to our team to make an impact. But how we deal with it mentally, and are we able to break teams down once they sit and create deep blocks, that's something I have yet to be convinced when it comes to Team Melli. We haven't seen too much of it, and like Iran Footy said, our goals today were off mistakes or maybe dubious decisions.
Sina, if there's anything you would like to add to Babak's comments, and we have a question from Twitter. Thank you. From @Ashkan, Pikapp, and his question was just like, where do you see the strengths and weaknesses of the Chinese side is that could be a favor to us?
I think that, to be completely honest with you, I'm not as knowledgeable about China. But again, I think, as I said earlier as well, one of the things that worries me is the fact that we tend to struggle against teams that play with 3 at the back. And I think that's something that can potentially be an issue for us. And again, this tournament, one of the good things about it, one of the most attractive things about it is the amount of big name managers that have been on the show. And again, on Thursday we'll see Lippi. I think he is the most expensive manager on the continent right now, taking on Karish, and I think that's an interesting battle. I'm not expecting them, as I said, to be overly attacking. But as Bobak said, on the counter, they do have pacey attacking players who could put us in a lot of trouble. And when we talk about today, and yes, at the end of the game, we won the game, and that's all that matters. We've gone into the next round. First win, as you said earlier on, in a knockout tournament since 2004, and that famous 4-3 win against South Korea. But of course, we have ambitions to win the tournament. And I think if we are to make the same defensive mistakes that we made today, even though we kept a clean sheet, but if we make the same mistakes again, it could be costly for us against China with the players, with the strikers that they have. So we need to be careful on that front. But again, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm not expecting anything other than a cagey match and maybe with one goal, one of the teams score a goal and win it.
Sina, from your own foot, is there anything you would like to add?
I actually think it won't be a 1-0. I think because China's only kept one clean sheet all tournament, and that was against the Philippines. I think they are a team where we can break them down and create chances as we did today. So if we're as well organised as we usually are, not as we were today, then I think we could go 2 or 3 up quite reasonably comfortably if we play our best.
Hey, this is Arash Markazi from ESPN, and you're listening to Golbezan, your one-stop shop for all your Iranian soccer news.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this episode up, but if there's anything you guys would like to add, but my last question is, what do you think Bobak is going to be your prediction?
Tough. I am a bit nervous. I feel it's going to be tight, but I'm going to go hopefully with a 2-1 win for us.
Oh, wow, okay. More than one goal. Sina?
I'm going to stick to what I've been saying for the whole episode, and I'll go for a 1-0 win to Iran and a Mehdi Taremi goal to redeem himself from all the chances he missed today. And also, I think we forgot to give a special mention as well. Masoud Shojaei made his debut in this game.
Right.
Which means now Queiroz has played all of his outfield players, which again shows the level of rotation. But it's good to see him on the pitch. I think it was pointed out that he's been in every single pre-match press conference with Queiroz, which again shows how important he is to the team as a leader. And it was good to see him get a few minutes on the pitch. Hopefully, is it the 2nd or the 3rd of February, the final? Hopefully, he'll be the one lifting the trophy for us.
Sina, from your own foot,
Yeah, definitely Masoud Shojaei. Really nice to see him play minutes today. You can tell he's a very big presence in the dressing room, motivating all the players. But as for the score prediction, I'm going to say 2-0 Iran.
Perfect. Guys, thank you guys so much for your thoughts and everything. Absolute pleasure. And for the listeners, one of our members of our team, Pejman Pars, will be headed to the UAE soon. And his Twitter handle is @Iransk Football. So if anybody wants to meet up with him, he'd be more than happy to meet up. And so he's a fun guy to hang out with. But guys, thank you guys so much. And hopefully this won't be Carlos Queiroz's last game at the helm of Team Mehdi and what a journey it has been with him being our manager. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Pasha.
Thank you, Pasha. It was good to have you back as well.
Thanks for having me. It's been a very enjoyable debut on Golbezan.